Is Israel poised to strike Iran, and is a new war between the two countries inevitable? It's called Project Sunrise, and it's all about rebuilding Gaza. Will it happen before or after Hamas is disarmed? Well, it depends on whom you ask, and the Trump administration and Israeli government might not be on the exact same page. And why is Israel eager to maintain sanctions on the Syrian regime? Will it ever trust the leader, Ahmed Al-Shara? Hello everyone, this is Brief.IL by INSS, a new weekly dive into the events shaping Israel's national security. My name is Emmanuelle Elbaz-Phelps. I am a journalist and the host of this program. Here with me in the studio is Reserve Major General Tamir Hayman, the chief of IDF Military Intelligence until 2021, who today is the executive director of the INSS, the Institute for National Security Studies. This is Brief.IL. Let's begin. Hello, Tamir.
Hi.
The last few days, everywhere we look, it seems that all the headlines in Israel are about, and in the United States, are about Iran, Israel, and the possibility of a new war between the two countries. And it's all about the Iranian ballistic missile program. So is this program back to a point that it leaves no choice to Israel but to strike it?
We have always have some choices to make in the strategic level. Yes, the problem is that the stockpile or that Iranians possess in ballistic missiles is reaching a point when it poses some form of a not existential threat, but a severe strategic threat. And the problems that senior officials in Israeli establishment, mainly in the army, when they see the trend, they see the level of accomplishment, that kind of stockpile, they see a threat looming, and therefore they recommend to strike in advance in order to decrease the level of that restocking of those ballistic missiles.
But what are we talking about? We're talking numbers of missiles? Are we talking number of launchers? Because during the war, the 12-day war, we heard from you and other experts that the question is not only the question of number of missiles, but also how do you launch them? And that Israel really found a way to strike the launchers in a way that Iran is not threatening us right now. There's a huge success. And we're not even half a year after, and here we are again.
Basically, Iranians, when they summarized the 12 days war, they agreed that the ballistic missile was a success. We think differently as Israelis because the casualties was way below our expectations. And the fact we have succeeded on destroying those or crippling their launching capabilities. But in their perceptions, it was successful. So they are trying to rebuild and focus on that ballistic missiles project in all dimensions. As for the launchers, you are absolutely right. They started the campaign against Israel with 500. We are talking about mobile launchers. Israel has destroyed about 150 and blocked another 150 in the tunnels that they cannot deploy and launch their missiles. So the rate of decrease of that element was very successful in terms of Israelis. The other element needed or possible launchers capabilities is underground tunnels, silos, secured deep in the mountain, way in the east, far away from Israel's approach compared to the last to the 12 days war. So it seems like they are trying to build an underground sort of secured launching sites way back in the east, and that is also troubling to the Israelis military establishment.
Okay, so this new information that you gave and explaining the balance between how Israel is getting ready to defend itself and how Iran is also getting ready to defend itself or attack, it brings us to the question again, are we there yet? Are we there to the point that there is no choice but going on a full confrontation again?
No, I think we still have a choice. We still have a choice, and still, as long as Israel's defensive capabilities is far greater than the offensive capabilities of Iran, we can handle the threat. We can manage the threat.
They are.
And it's as is right now. It is after we embedded the laser defense capabilities and upgraded Iron Dome, and are in a process of extensive rebuilding our Arrow 3 stockpile. We have these 5 layers of defense that is still valid and can be trusted compared to the current number of missiles that the Iranian has. But the trend is negative. In the competition between offensive and defensive, the defense always loses because it cannot really upgrade the defense to an unscaled number. It's always restricted in some manner. So the trend is negative. But the question is whether it's inevitable, whether it's bound to happen sometime in the future. The answer is that if nothing changed in the diplomatical layer, if nothing changed in terms of the Iranian regime and the maximum pressure campaign that America is enforcing, the question is yes. But we can do differently those 2 elements. United States should reinforce dramatically better the maximum pressure campaign against that regime. That aims to push the regime into agreeing to some form of a diplomatical procedure or diplomatical agreement that can be monitored, can be enforced, is the way to handle threats and balance between nation states. Iran is not a terror organization. It's a state that deploys terror all across the Middle East, but as itself, it wants to be a state like all states. So they have interest there. The situation internally in Iran is dire right now. So we need the diplomatical trend as well as the threats that we are possessing, that if that doesn't really happen, if no diplomatical agreement will be achieved, and there is the maximum pressure campaign will not somehow destabilize the government of Iran, destabilize the regime in Iran. If those 2 collapse, doesn't really work, we still have these huge assault capabilities that we are preparing for wartime. So it's more balancing the efforts, not sticking into just one military tool.
Is there something in Israel done to try and develop the diplomatic path, or is there a decision in Israel, in the Israeli government, that only the military way is the way to deal with Iran?
Right now, in terms of Israeli current government, they don't see any political horizon with Iran. This current Israeli government rejects the idea of presenting a lifeline to the Iranian regime. There is only one solution in the eyes of the Israeli current government. It's either destabilize the regime in order to topple it and to bring about a new regime to Iran, which will change all the situation in the Middle East, or strike Iran. The Americans have other horizons imagined. But unfortunately, it seems like since the 12 Days War, the Iranian file has been closed in the White House. It seems like it's been accomplished. It is already it's a news of the past. Now they are focusing on the Ukraine-Russia conflict, trying to resolve it, and there is abandonness of that Iranian file. I think what we have seen in this last few days is an attempt by Israelis to raise their attentions to the fact that it's not solved at all. As long as the regime is there, and as long as they are rebuilding the capabilities, we need to revive everything. The military dimension about threats, and et cetera, and the diplomatical avenue, which is still open, but nobody passes that avenue.
And the reason that the Trump administration sees the Iranian story as a done deal is because Trump said, well, the nuclear program is obliterated. We've done that. That's over. But there is another very interesting report that was published by the Israeli journalist Nadav Eyal a few days ago. And he writes that Iran tried to develop a fusion-based nuclear warhead before the war in last June. And I'm asking you because he notes in his report that you published a paper on this issue shortly after the war, last July, but you wrote that this ambitious project failed. So could you explain in a few words what was this project and why it failed?
Fusion, creating a bomb based on fusion, is a long-standing ambition by scientists and the military industry worldwide, but it's impossible to achieve. Maybe in the future it will be accomplished. It's the ultimate bomb, the ultimate source of energy, but nobody succeeded on harnessing it into operational level. Iranians had that ambition. Everybody knew that they will fail along the road, so everybody thought that let them spend their money and time about a useless project that has no future. The problems with the Iranians that in just before the 12 Days War, they acknowledged the fact that it's a failed project, but they thought that if they will transfer it in the last minute from fusion to fission, they will succeed, and they were right. And that was the trigger of the 12 Days War. They were absolutely right. Now, after the 12 Days War, I think that threat is minimum because of the fact that the scientists involved were killed during the 12 Days War, and the project was destroyed. The basic capabilities of that project was destroyed. So right now, there's no threat in the terms of the Iranian nuclear project, not in fusion and not in fission. The problem is that Trump, when addressed the Iranian project, unveiled what's really important to Trump, the nuclear project, and not the other very threatening capabilities of Iran. And Iran is not just a nuclear threat. And it seems like Trump will back Israel and will do whatever in its position on the nuclear project, but not on the regime change ambitions of most of Israeli officials.
But we have to say, to be fair, that the Iranian ballistic program is new as an existential threat in the eyes of the Israeli public. I mean, you probably dealt with it when you were the chief of IDF Intelligence until 2021. But we heard for 20 years and more, Prime Minister Netanyahu talking about the nuclear program of Iran. And then just before the war, he explained that there is another existential threat, which is ballistic missile program. Now, every country has, we said already, a missile program of a sort to defend itself and to be ready for attack when it needs. So maybe we are in a deadlock because there is no backing up by Donald Trump on this issue, and he's the one that holds the cards for the diplomatic course right now. How do we get out of this deadlock?
No, we're not in a deadlock. The ballistic missile is a threat that's being handled by Israeli defensive capabilities supported by United States. It's not just an Israeli problem. It's a regional problem. All Middle Eastern countries have this potential threat of the Iranian ballistic missiles. It's not that Middle Eastern. Also European countries like France and Italy also are covered by the range of those missiles. So it's a worldwide project, and it's being tackled along the lines of defense. Offensive is really focused on the Israeli capabilities to cripple it. But we need to ask ourselves, maybe there will be another cycle of violence against the ballistic missiles. We should ask ourselves, what should we do differently than the previous attempt to cripple that ballistic missile project? Because the 12 Days War, one of its objectives laid down by Prime Minister Netanyahu was crippling the missiles project. And 6 months later, we are bound to go to another cycle. So what we have done different, what we have done wrong previously? I think that the answer to that question is very complicated. And it may lead us to the idea that endless cycles of erosion against that state is not the preferred strategy. Maybe we should try differently in terms of deterrence, in terms of diplomatical process, in terms of different kind of intervention by Americans, and especially this president who can really pressure the Iranian regime.
According to Noor News, it's a news outlet close to Iran's Supreme National Security Council, that's how they describe themselves, all this talk that we're having right now, even you and I, and in the Israeli media about a possibility of a new strike against Iran is a spin by the Israeli government not to talk about Gaza.
So I don't think that's a full spin. There is current threat evolving in Iran. We should address that threat. And there was a large-scale exercise on Saturday evening. That's fact. This is true. But no doubt that Prime Minister Netanyahu, when he meets Trump, he will prefer discussing Iran's evolving threats than rather deal with very sensitive political issues like the next stage in Gaza or a possible agreement with Syria, a security agreement. And all of those aspects are not comfortable, to say the least, in the discussions with Trump. So it's true that he wants to divert attention to the Iranian case, but the Iranian case is valid. There is something. It's not just we are hallucinating it.
Pretty amazing. What I just heard from you is that Prime Minister Netanyahu would rather talk about something that has to do with a military action than anything that has to do with diplomatic course.
We are approaching election here. Everything is sensitive in that aspect. Talking about stage B in Gaza, reconstruction of Gaza, very, very sensitive in Israel.
So let's do it. Let's talk about the new phase 2 in Gaza. A few days ago, there was a publication by the Wall Street Journal about Project Sunrise, a huge, ambitious project led by Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff that is supposed to, in a course of 10 years, rebuild Gaza to this high-tech hub of prosperity for all.
It's a long-standing dream that Gaza will be Singapore of the Middle East.
The Riviera.
The Riviera of the Middle East. But presenting a plan that seems to be so disconnected from the dire reality of Gaza, the 2 million unemployed citizens of Gaza, it seems so far-fetched that it seems like a fantasy than a strategy. There is another endeavor right now that's being promoted, the Emirate building of a new neighborhood near the city of Rafah. Unlike the Sunrise project, that project is viable. That project is very modest. 20,000 Gazans will live in a not privately owned area near the city of Rafah. Those kinds of projects are more valid, more positive to the future of Gaza rather than dream of this high towers on the shores of the Mediterranean.
Let's explain. The Emirati project that you just talked about, isn't it one of the first steps of the huge Sunrise project, or it's something completely different?
I don't know. The Sunrise is a AI-driven images on a PowerPoint presentation. The Emirate plan is a well-detailed infrastructure building process. Those are two things that cannot be compared or cannot be evaluated in the same level. The problem of the Emirati project, it is that it is reconstruction. And reconstruction, according to Israel must be after demilitarization. So after the release of Ran Gvili, the last remaining dead hostages, after that Hamas loses its grip over the government of Gaza, and presenting that, approving that, will create a not comfortable situation to the current Israeli government.
And still, you call it an Emirati project, but the Americans are involved in it, right? It's part of their vision to show Rafah as the new Gaza, of showing Gazans that they have a possibility to live away from Hamas and maybe appeal them to push Hamas away by seeing these housings and this possibility of living under an international force and then replaced by a Palestinian force. It's like a glimpse into their future.
Maybe that's the first step, the first modest step that will take Gazans from the area controlled by Hamas and move them back into the area controlled by Israel and accommodate them in this new modest projects that should be built. Maybe. And then eventually it will create a situation where you are able to build those high towers. I don't know. Constantly when I am meeting or when I'm exposed to those very, very large-scale initiatives done by the American, I feel that there's a little disconnection between the vision and the reality.
Because it's too ambitious? They're jumping over a few steps?
They are ignoring two things. One is the population of Gaza. Where do they live? Who owns the land that above it we will build those high towers?
Who owns the land in Gaza?
They're privately owned. Most of the 90% of the Gaza land is privately owned. So, and the owners would probably has ambitions of their own. It's very complicated. And the second, the economy. All of those high towers and businessmen, what are they going to be living from? Most of Gazans are living from agriculture. So ignoring the economic element, ignoring the national ambition, ignoring the privately owned land, ignoring all of those very troubling situations, very delaying situation is something that should be addressed, I think.
And so you say that this plan is ignoring the population. Is anybody asking the Palestinians what they want? I guess the Gazans know, but maybe the Palestinian Authority? Are they part of this plan, of even the thinking about the plan?
No. According to this administration, Gaza is being represented, Hamas is being represented by Qatar and Turkey. So there is this temptation that if Hamas decides to disarm itself, it will get benefit by $113 billion projects. So that's something that's been relayed through Qatar and Turkey, supposed to be relayed by Qatar and Turkey to Hamas to convince Hamas to disarm itself. The Palestinian Authority is not a factor. It will be involved, yes, but it will be involved in a very modest way. They will have a seat on the International Board of Peace. 5 of the 8 members of the Technocratic Committee, the new government of Gaza, are former Palestinian Authority officials that are supportive of Fatah. And there will be a deployment of about 7,000 Palestinian officers that will be deployed in Gaza. So they are involved in the practical manner of fulfillment, the 20 points plan. But nobody really asks them for their opinion about these new projects.
But I'm confused because in the 20 points plans by Donald Trump, there is this number 19 when there is a path to a Palestinian state.
Yeah, the idea that the Palestinian Authority will eventually, after 2 years, will take over Gaza from the Technocratic Committee, from the Board of Peace, after the starting of the reconstruction. But currently, due to the fact that Israel rejects any direct connection with the Palestinian Authority, and due to the fact that Trump doesn't really... Abu Mazen is not one of his favorite leaders in the Middle East, to say the least. Okay, he would prefer to talk with the Emir of Qatar and the President of Turkey in order to address the Palestinian and not Abu Mazen and the Palestinian Authority.
Okay, so Donald Trump is going forward with a plan. If at one point he has to include the Palestinian Authority, whatever it will look like, he will do it, but it's not on his mind right now. It's not the main concern.
It's not on his mind. He won't give them to disrupt his plan, and they consider them as an actor that can be manipulated, can be pressured by Saudi, by the Arab countries. It's all about 3 pressuring points that Trump uses in order to enforce its plan. Trump pressures the Israelis, Qatar and Turkey pressures Hamas, and Saudi Arabia and other moderate Arab countries pressuring the Palestinian Authority. So you can handle the Gaza with three stewards, three representatives that will, if done correctly, all you need to agree is Trump should agree with Saudi, Qatar and Turkey, and you've solved the problem without the involvement of Israelis or the Palestinian Authority.
Okay, so next week, Prime Minister Netanyahu is supposed to meet Donald Trump in Florida. For sure, Donald Trump will raise the question of Gaza, and he will probably pressure to go to phase 2. And as you said, this is a big problem for the Israeli government, which wants to first obtain the release of the body of the last hostage, which is Ran Gvili, but also wants Hamas to put his arms down before anything else. So what will Prime Minister Netanyahu try to obtain from Donald Trump on this issue?
First of all, the biggest point, or the heaviest point he have is Ran Gvili. That's a breach of the agreement. Ran Gvili is the last remaining hostages, so if you're not releasing them, Hamas didn't carry its part of the deal. Qatar and Turkey didn't follow the Trump deal. So first of all, return him back.
Although there was no agreement 100% that everybody will be remain, because there was an assumption also in the Israeli establishment that maybe there is no way to find everybody.
Assumptions aside, that is what's written in the agreement. Okay. And Netanyahu knows that Trump is the deal maker. He appreciates the fact that everybody will take their part in fulfilling his plan. And right now, Hamas breaches that agreement. So this is the point he will raise. Secondly, it's the element of demilitarize Hamas. The fact of the matter is that no one is volunteering to demilitarize Hamas right now. There's a huge summit in Qatar, in Doha, hosted by the American Central Command commander, that tried to convince member or donating states to be more involved in the Intermediate Stabilization Force, that's the ISF, that should somehow force Hamas into demilitarize itself. The only states that are volunteering in Qatar and Turkey, we know that the ideology of Qatar and Turkey is on the contrary. They want to establish Hamas. They want to protect Hamas. They want to ensure that Hamas doesn't really disappear from the face of the earth. So probably Netanyahu would say, how can we move on to stage B when there's no demilitarization of the Gaza Strip?
Is there any card that Netanyahu can play in front of Trump?
Trump has another thing on his side. That is Section 17 on the 20 points plan, which says clearly that we can move ahead without cooperation of Hamas in the areas that are demilitarized and controlled by the IDF. We can rebuild Gaza or deploy the ISF and take control on the areas controlled by the IDF. So Trump would probably try to pressure Netanyahu to agree of reconstruction in that area. By the way, the Emirati project is in that area, is in the Israelis control half of Gaza. So why delay that? Then that returns back to the issue of Ran Gvili. Are we going to reconstruct Gaza before Ran Gvili returns back? Trump has his vision of the Middle East that he will not stop and delay on the ground of one dead hostages is not that important in his eyes. So I think that's a point of real disagreement. They don't see eye to eye at that point. And I think Netanyahu will rely on the Ran Gvili aspect as a way to delay it.
But again, he can explain and explain and explain. If Trump decides that he still wants to go forward and start the reconstruction, what can Netanyahu do?
He cannot stop the reconstruction on the area controlled by the Israel, because that's part of the agreement. So I imagine they will declare the stage 2, starting in southern part of Gaza Strip, in the areas near Rafah by the Emiratis, and that will be the declaration. And Netanyahu will explain to the Israeli public that half of Gaza Strip was demilitarized by the IDF, and therefore in the half of Gaza Strip that was demilitarized, we can start the construction. The other half that's controlled by Hamas, nothing goes in except for humanitarian aid.
And then if that's the case, IDF will withdraw more than from the yellow line to a sort of a red line. So the ISF can come in the middle and be a buffer between Hamas and IDF?
You're absolutely right according to the plan, but wrong according to the capability of the ISF. The ISF has no really capability right now to take over from the IDF. And it suits Netanyahu and the IDF to remain on the yellow line. The General Chief of Staff, Eyal Zamir, has already declared that the yellow line is the new border, the new security border of Israel.
It doesn't work. I'm sorry. It's not even according to the Trump's plan, because Trump's plan says that Israel will withdraw more from the Gaza Strip when Hamas puts down his arm. So there's supposed to be a connection between the two. And
let's try to make some order. Half of Gaza Strip is already demilitarized.
Right. It's under IDF control. 53% of it.
According to the 20-point plan, in that area, you can deploy the ISF, and the IDF can withdraw from neighborhoods, areas that are that the IDF is being replaced by the ISF.
Okay.
There's no ISF. It's just an idea. There's no boots on the ground that can take over lands from the IDF in order to defend the yellow line or create some buffer between the Hamas-controlled area and the ISF and Israel.
And so the Emirati plan that has also some sort of American finger in it to build housing for 20,000 Palestinians, it's going to happen controlled by IDF.
Exactly.
Yes?
That's something that Netanyahu can agree to. Israel continue to control the yellow line, and just across the yellow line, few meters, hundreds of meters from the yellow line, there will be a large infrastructure rebuilding project of the new Emirati neighborhood. According to Israelis, that is acceptable. Large parts of Israel right-wing supporter will consider that as a violation of a promise done by Netanyahu that there will not be a reconstruction before full demilitarization of Gaza Strip. That's not the case. It's only half of Gaza Strip. That's a friction. I think Netanyahu can somehow circle it.
If you listen to supporters of the coalition and the Israeli government right now, there is this music implying that IDF could go back to a war in Gaza to do the job and demilitarize Hamas.
Yeah.
Is this a possibility?
I think that's what Smotrich and Ben-Gvir want to achieve. Those two ministers consider the situation right now is very negative. Hamas is regaining its former capabilities, not all capabilities, not the missile project, but regaining the authority towards the civilian population. It gets money by taxing humanitarian aid, 20% tax on humanitarian aid convoys. So it's regaining, it's recruiting new members of Hamas to be part of it. So they see this current intermediate stage as a negative. So therefore they are preaching, they are trying to convince that we should return back to full-scale operation, reconquer the other half of Gaza Strip that is controlled by Hamas, and the IDF should somehow demilitarize Hamas totally.
And then Israel should occupy the Gaza Strip, and there should be new Jewish settlers in the Gaza Strip.
Yeah, those are two. They are not declaring that as a vision, but they are stating they have some truth in their claim that the current situation is negative because of the fact that Hamas is regaining possibility. That's true. The solution in their mind is not the Trump plan of establishing this technocratic committee, etc., but retaking Gaza by the IDF and succeeding to do something that we haven't really succeeded, frankly speaking, 2 years. We have already conquered all of Gaza Strip. Israeli soldiers went all across Gaza Strip, and we didn't really accomplish that mission. Now, because of the fact that there's no hostages, we have more freedom of action. We can do things that we haven't done before. So that's their argument right now.
But Donald Trump, the American president, will not let that happen.
I don't know to predict Donald Trump. Sorry for that. I don't know how to anticipate his decision-making. Maybe he will be furious on Hamas for the fact that they are not fulfilling their part of the agreement. Maybe he will somehow be reminded that it was his long-standing promise that Hamas has no future in Gaza and Hamas should demilitarize itself. Maybe Netanyahu will remind him, they are not demilitarized, so give us the permission and we will do the hard work, we will do the black work for you.
Okay, much more to say about that, but I want to keep a few minutes to take you to the third and last subject for today, which is what's happening with Syria. And there is a report by the Israeli public channel Kan last few days that says that aides to Prime Minister Netanyahu asked U.S. President Donald Trump, through his entourage, to retain some American sanctions on Syria. Now, the idea being that the sanctions could be used as a bargaining chip in future negotiations, but according to the report, the request was not accepted, and Trump is set to repeal the sanctions next week. Why is Israel so eager to keep sanctions on Al-Shara's regime?
Because we don't know where that regime heads for. We don't know. Are you sure that this new regime will be a moderate, liberal democracy? I can guarantee that that's not the fact. It's obvious right now that the temporary period of time that Al-Shara take control as a leader, it becomes the permanent situation. He is practically the dictator of Syria. His previous, his history as a radical jihadistic, extreme warrior that separated itself from Al-Qaeda previously, but basically he was against the West according to the jihadistic, Islamistic way of life. Did he really abandon it? Just the other week, one of the members of security forces of Al-Shara killed 3 Americans. Okay? It was not an ISIS attack. It was a member of the structure, a member of the security forces of HTS, of Syria. We know that there's no coherent structure on all Sunni radical sections that are affiliated to HTS. The major problem in Syria is not the Bedouins, the Alawites, the Kurds, or the Druze. The main challenge of Al-Shara is the Sunni radical former comrades of him that he's trying somehow to convince them to stay together. So relieving the sanctions without positive evidence on the ground that he is positively consolidating Syria in a moderate pathway, that is losing the only leverage we had on him.
But isn't he already showing that he's trying to do some steps to stabilize his country? Writing the beginning of a constitution, trying to integrate some parts of the rebels into the army, talking about diplomatic discussion with the United States and security agreement maybe in the horizon with Israel. Isn't he showing that he's trying to not be an enemy to the region?
For every positive point you will raise, I can raise a negative point. It is unclear, okay? It seems like, okay, for example, I like this idea of the fact that there are pubs open and you can sell liquor, but nobody sells liquor because they are afraid of the government. And if they are drinking liquor, they are hiding not in the streets, for example. So for any case you would raise, I would say that there's an alarming aspect. The minorities, okay? We had 2 atrocities of massacre that was already conducted in front of the Shiites and in front of, not the Shiites,
against the
Alawites,
Druze and the
Alawites and the Druze. And the Kurds are in a kind of status quo, but not really fully integrated into the regime. So that's not a real positive sign. Yes.
But it's not a clear cut that Al-Shara sends his troop to kill them.
True.
And you also say that he would open an inquiry. Maybe he could have done more.
Let's wait for the inquiry to...
I'm not naive. I understand what you're saying. What I'm asking is that, is the interest of Israel having a stable Syria or not?
Yes, it is on the long-term condition that we will make sure that they are following the pathway towards a moderate state. And the only way to ensure that is through leverage. And the only leverage that Al-Shara really wants are the relief of the sanctions. This is why, we on the long term, I'm all for relieving the sanctions. I'm all for consolidated, moderate Syria. But it's not hoping for it and just giving up leverage without any guarantee that that's the case.
Because his country is very poor. He needs to not be crippled by sanctions so people can actually have food, water, flour, electricity.
That's what drives the Trump administration to relieve the Caesar Act and etc. They're hoping that the relief of sanctions will improve daily life and that will reduce violence. Our history shows that that's not the case. Violence, terror does not reduced by economic benefits. It's all about ideology. It's all about education. It's all about force enforcement. Those are the issues that really helps to crush negative elements in Syria. So yes, we need to create a pathway. We need some form of strategic plan, some form of a Marshall Plan to Syria. But the Marshall Plan need to be closely monitored and closely follow the tangible ways in the right direction. And if they're gone in the wrong direction, you can punish it, you can do something with it.
But we've seen Donald Trump, perfuming Al-Shara, and he already loves the guy. He said that. So it seems, and according to this report, that he's not really listening to the Israeli concerns about the sanctions and what you just explained. Again, the question being, is there anything that Netanyahu can do or say? Has he any leverage to still try and convince Donald Trump or to play the negotiation part with him on that?
The only leverage we have is a disruption level, okay? We are controlling parts of Syria right now, the buffer zone, and we will not withdraw unless we will be fully convinced that the Al-Shara goes to the moderate manner. That's the only leverage we have. And we will continue striking if we see emerging threats in Syria. And we will make sure that there is no massacre on the Druze minority because of our sensitivity to the cooperation that we have with the Druze community. That's the only leverage that Netanyahu has, the leverage of power. On the other hand, few of Trump's most admired leaders are supporting Al-Shara. Erdogan in Turkey, MBS in Saudi. Those are two powerful individuals that Trump almost adores, and they are presenting Al-Shara's case. So that's the balance of power. You have the disruptor in Israel, and you have those two leaders that are trying to promote another future for Syria.
Again, a subject that we will come back to. Reserve Major General Tamir Hayman, the head of the INSS and the former chief of intelligence in IDF, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And that's it for this episode. This was Brief.IL by INSS, a new weekly dive into the events shaping Israel's national security. We warmly invite you to follow us on any podcast platform of your choice. You can also watch us on YouTube on the INSS channel. Thank you to the team, Ariel Nugrian, Shai Shachaf, Omer Waxelbaum. I am Emmanuelle Elbaz-Phelps, a journalist and the host of this program. Have a good one. Until next week.